Have you heard this story? We were already here. The claim that's always made by the African American community referring to European explorers encountering dark skinned or swart. That's SWART. Look it up, peoples. Already on the land when they arrived in the Americas. Or have you ever heard or been involved in the argument that your true identity was stripped away during slavery, that you're really of Moorish origins or Hebrew Israelite origins? As a highly melanated America, how do you answer that question? Where are you from? No, where are you really from? Where are your people from? I know you've been asked that question, so how do you answer it, friend, sis, brother, cousin? Because me, I can't help myself. Anytime anyone asks me this question, I must give them a history lesson. I must do it. I cannot help myself. I can't. Now, if you follow me on any of my socials or you've been following my authorship journey, so I did, and I located the family that held my paternal ancestors as slaves. I'm sure many of us have taken DNA tests and you received your results, but imagine seeing the name of your third great grandmother and simultaneously seeing the former slave owner's family with a long-standing Facebook account dedicated to it. I thank life every day for allowing me to see the opposite of me in humanity so I can truly see myself, because what? I was thankful for the knowledge. But let's go back to the beginning. This will carry us full circle from one branch of my tree all the way to Virginia. My original expectation, possibly locating an ancestor that could directly connect my family to the African continent before 1776. So I began with my mother's side. There are two things that I know to be true. No one can tell me anything I don't answer to, and several narratives can exist at the same time. So I did the research. DNA results came back African, Aztec, Egyptian, more African, a little colonizer, and more African. I took 2 different tests, both of which updated their results within a year. That's not strange at all. So archival research was the path forward. I wanted to know more about the people, the land, the history. I didn't go looking for the Aboriginals. The Aboriginals found me. Labor contracts, land grants, death certificates, and men with government seals deciding what a human being was allowed to be called. Negro, colored, mulatto, black, African American. Each word arrived with authority. Each word pretended to describe us all, and each word was also a filing system. For generations, Black people in America have been told that our history begins as a ship hardens at the auction block and becomes legible only after 1870, when formerly enslaved people were finally listed by name in the federal census. We are told that before that point, there is a wall, a brick wall, a dead end, a bureaucratic cliff where family memory drops into the ledger and disappears. But I did not find a wall. Yeah, okay. Originally, I did run into it a little bit, but I moved it out of my way. I found names. I found Ellen. I found Sam. I found Sally. I found Motley Norment and William Ives Norment. I found Norment's Lane in Whiteville, Tennessee. I found a Freedmen's Bureau labor contract dated January 1st, 1866. I found the plantation family that held my ancestors in bondage. The map will not explain what happened there. It will show fields. It will show roads. It may show the ordinary geometry of agricultural land. Tree lines, cleared acreage, long property divisions, the quiet infrastructure of a southern county that has learned how to look innocent from above. But my family's record does not let that land remain ordinary. My third great grandmother, Ellen Norment, was born around 1842. She appears in the family line at the precise historical rupture where Black genealogy often becomes difficult. Part 2. The contract. The document that changed everything was the Freedmen's Bureau labor contract from the immediate aftermath of the Civil War on January 1st, 1866. Sam Norment, Ellen Norment, and Sally Norment entered into a labor agreement with William M. Norment. The document places them in the Reconstruction economy at the exact moment when slavery had legally ended, but land ownership, capital, tools, housing, and political power remained overwhelmingly in the hands of the former slaveholding class. But freedom on paper is not the same thing as land. It is not wages. It is not safety. It is not literacy. It is not a mule, a deed, or legal protection from the very families that had owned the fields, houses, barns, cotton, and roads. For families like mine, emancipation did not mean walking into a clean future. It meant negotiating survival on familiar dirt under new paperwork. The labor contract matters because it names people. It establishes proximity. It shows family structure. It shows that Ellen, Sam, and Sally remained connected after emancipation. And it places them in direct relation to the Norment estate system. That kind of document is not merely genealogical evidence. It's a hinge in American history. On one side, human beings counted as property. On the other, human beings entering contracts, still constrained by poverty and coercion, but now visible as legal actors. The structural transformation of our family from property to free citizens is captured entirely in a single remarkable document, handwritten, preserved in the National Archives, Record Group 105. For decades, standard digital indexes misread the elegant cursive script, transcribing the employer's name as W.N. Norment. But a direct inspection of the original ledger under the directions and control of Mr. Rufus Archer, executed January 1st, 1866, approved January 19th, 1866, by John D. Usry, agent. The closing page reads, voluntarily signed this first day, January AD 1866. And there they are, William M. Norment, employer, and right below him, Sam Norment, who signed with an X. Ellen Norment, Sally Norment, signing as free people for the first time on the same land where they had been held as property. That Ellen gave birth to our second great-grandfather, William Ives Norman. William grew up on Norment Lane during the height of Reconstruction. His children's generation, James, Gertrude, August, Adele, and William, would navigate a world where the family surname fluidly shifted between Norment and Norman on marriage certificates, land deeds, and school rosters as they carved out their independent lives away from the plantation shadow. 6 generations. Let me say their names. Ellen Norment, born around 1842, enslaved at the Norment place. She signed that contract. William Ives Norment, 1871 to 1941, born free on Norment's Lane during Reconstruction with Francis Ella Swanson. William Norman, 1895 to 1948, the name settling on paper into Norman with Hattie James. Earl Edward Norman, 1939 to 1993, my grandfather. Census Reconstruction, surname variation, plantation geography, Freedmen's Bureau records, Hardman County history, the slave schedules of 1850 and 1860, probate logic and estate distributions, colonial land records, Virginia patent books 10 and 12, migration patterns from Virginia into the Old Southwest, and the paper trail of statutory and administrative racial reclassification. Here's the archival chain of custody. You got to follow the years. 1714. The Virginia Tidewater. Samuel Norment secures 410 acres at Cahokie Swamp, King William counties westward, and enslaved families are mobilized as human capital. 1815 to 1825, the Alabama fever forced overland migration into the deep south. Human lineages recorded as inventory in items in probate ledgers under a law called Partus Sequestra Ventrum. The child follows the condition of the mother. 1826, West Tennessee. Nathaniel Ellis Norman established a cotton plantation and a textile factory in Hardeman County. Ceded lands cleared by coerced labor. January 1st, 1866. The Hinge. The Freedmen's Bureau contract executed at Whiteville. Ellen, Sam, and Sally Norman signed as legal actors, remaining on familiar dirt under new terms. 1871, Free Ground. William Ives Norman is born on the same land into Reconstruction, the family surname shifting between Norment and Norman across the record. It successfully tricked us into arguing over whether we belong to this country, while hiding the fact that our blood was already mixed with the soil before the first ship from Scotland ever dropped anchor. The Normans obtained their captured workforce through two primary avenues. One, direct transatlantic cargo. During the late 1600s and early 1700s, British merchant ships, heavily backed by the Royal African Company, sailed directly into the York and Pamunkey River. Bacon's rebellion were systematically forced into labor alongside arriving African captives, a process accelerated by the Virginia Slave Codes of 1705, which legally grouped all non-Christian servants imported, quote, by sea or land, unquote, into standard property tax laws. By the time Nathaniel E. Norment moved from Virginia to Alabama and finally did a Norment Lane in Whiteville, Tennessee in 1826, the international slave trade had been legally banned, 1808. So, to build his cotton empire, and became a central enforcer of racial classification under Virginia's 1924 Racial Integrity Act. His campaign targeted indigenous identity with chilling precision to eliminate any intermediate legal ground between white and colored. Plecker distributed circular letters to local courthouse registers threatening criminal prosecution if they accepted Indian designations for specific local surnames. Virginia Indians who did not fit the state's preferred racial categories were pressured, recategorized, or erased on paper. Records were altered. Families who identified as Indian were pushed into colored classifications. Public documents became weapons. This is not conspiracy. It's a documented policy. And it matters because classification is not neutral. Classification controls inheritance, marriage, land claims, tribal continuity, school access, political recognition, historical memory. To rename a people on paper is to interfere with their descendants' ability to know themselves. That's why the modern argument, the laws would not have needed to bundle them into identical racial classifications. The Virginia Act of 1682, Act 11, the Colonial Assembly passed a law to explicitly define who could be legally enslaved for life. Listen to the text. All servants imported and brought into this country who were not Christians in their native country shall be accounted and be slaves, and all Indians which shall hereafter be sold by our neighboring Indians or any other trafficking with us for slaves are hereby adjudged, deemed, and taken to be slaves. And all Indians, they wrote it in the same sentence. Then came the 1705 Virginia Slave Codes, where the state consolidated its definitions. All servants imported and brought into this country by sea or land who were not Christians in their native country. Records, at least for my family, is what breaks that psychological loop, forcing the truth back into the light. Now let me show you the receipts. We have the Bureau of Vital Statistics circular letter from 1924. We have a list of local surnames belonging to families who have for years claimed Indian status to evade segregation laws and retain underlying land considerations. You are hereby directed to register these individuals strictly as colored or Negro. Any clerk who knowingly accepts an Indian designation for these family lines shall be subject to prosecution under the terms of the Act. Dr. Walter Plecker. The strongest proof that melanated aboriginals existed is the massive bureaucratic effort the government undertook to erase them from the record. Sit with that. If they were not there, the state would not have spent. In a country that repeatedly named us, finding the name is an act of recovery. In a country that repeatedly moved the boundary lines of race, finding the records is an act of resistance. In a country that told us the wall was impenetrable, every document becomes a door. The question is no longer whether we have a history. The question is whether America is prepared for what happens when we read it correctly. I know that my family's story cannot be contained by a single category. I know that the plantation was not the beginning. I know that African American is too often used as a period where there should be a question mark, a comma, a footnote. I'm taking back the right to investigate the one it tried to bury. The receipts are sacred. I'm author Alicia Nicole Norment. That your ancestors' labor built wealth they were forbidden to own. The courtroom can feel like the obvious destination. You want somebody to answer. You want the ledger dragged into public view. You want the descendants of the people counted as poverty to be treated as heirs to the truth. Then I thought I wanted the land, to own the dirt where they were once owned. That seemed like the cleanest form of poetic justice. But the research sharpened the desire into something larger. I do not merely want land. I want Black people in America to stop being forced into arguments created by the people who reclassified us. I want us to stop treating the records as if they were honest just because they were official. I want us to understand that a birth certificate can lie. A census can flatten. A deed can conceal theft. A plantation biography can praise industry while omitting the people whose bodies made the industry possible. I want us to know that when our ancestors appear under changing names, that does not make them confused. The question is no longer whether we have a history. The question is whether America is prepared for what happens when we read it correctly. I know that my family's story cannot be contained by a single category. I know that the plantation was not the beginning. I know that African American is too often used as a period where there should be a question mark, a comma, a footnote, a court record, a land patent, a tribal boundary, a family Bible, a Freedmen's Bureau contract, and a grandmother's memory. I know that the people who controlled the records controlled the story for a long time, but not forever. Because I found Ellen, because I found Sam, because I found Sally, because I followed the paper past the plantation, past emancipation, past Tennessee, past Virginia, past the official labels, and into the older question America has spent centuries trying to avoid. What if the people this country tried hardest to classify were never confused about who they were? What if the confusion was the system? What if the receipts were always there waiting for a descendant stubborn enough to read them? This is my family. This is my history. This is the result of research that required discipline, grief, skepticism, pattern recognition, and refusal. I'm not asking America to give me an identity. I'm taking back the right to investigate the one it tried to bury. The receipts are sacred. I'm author Alicia Nicole Norment.